Well, welcome to the Stone Cottage. It's kind of late July. I think it's July 22nd, and I thought you might enjoy seeing what's blooming in the garden today. This is the front of the house, and the window boxes are blooming, and the pink down here is the garden phlox. And one of my favorite things this time of year is the hardy hibiscus. And you can see these incredible red blooms. And the variety that we have is not a clumping hardy hibiscus, it's more the columnar kind that's tall and thin. And ours kind of grows up through the U, and down here I've got a couple of them blooming just right there on the deck, and a few more here. These things are huge, and I have a second one that's more pink than these red ones, but they are so spectacular. And then here's the garden phlox. And the thing that makes garden phlox so interesting is if you cut it back in like May, do a Chelsea chop is what it's called, but cut it back, then it will branch and make twice as many blooms, which is obviously best. And up here blooming, this is a Rose of Sharon with a double flower. And here's the other window box up here. So I've got the pinks and the yellows going, which echoes the colors found down here. And this is the garden I replanted last week. And so you can see the Rudbeckia was here, and I can't remember what the other yellow is back there, the taller yellow. And the purple right here is a crepe myrtle. I'm looking at that, and there's some vine growing in it that I need to dig out. But what I have done with this bed that I replanted is I took some old recycled bricks and put in a very flowing edge there to it. Now, that bare spot between the grass and the brick, we want that to fill in with grass. And our problem is not keeping the grass out of the flower bed, it's keeping the flower bed out of the grass. We just need about 6 square feet of sod, and they were out of sod, and they were supposed to get it in yesterday, but I haven't had time to go back and pick up some more sod, but we'll lay down some sod so it'll fill in that spot. But that originally did have grass. The plants just migrated. Now I've also added in some other things to the flower bed, and of course you can see the beautiful pink hydrangea and the pink echinacea and the blue delphiniums. The red is the bee balm that was there, and I transplanted some of it around. And I went to the nursery this past week, and they had their annuals half price. So I bought 5 of these little, I think they're a type of heather, but they have a cute little magenta flower on them, and they'll stay low and spread out and kind of fill in those spots. And I had already put in some basil. So this is basil that I had grown from seed, and I just stuck it in the ground there. And I went and bought some dahlias, and the one back there has the most blooms, but I bought 2 of them and divided one of them and then planted the other one in here. And I put in some more compost so it would look nice and tidy. And this is the daylily that I transplanted, and he's continuing to bloom. Some of the rest of them have already finished. There's the tiger lily that you can see like 3 petals left on it, so he has finished his bloom. But the phlox there has gotten ginormous, so he's really big. And the pink back there by that stepping stone is the yarrow. There are 3 of the yarrow, and they're blooming nicely. And I stuck in a couple of chrysanthemums that will bloom in the fall. That'll give us a little fall color, but the echinacea should continue to bloom. And as I recall, those were kind of a deep reddish color. They just survived from last year, so I just stuck them in the ground. Anyway, so that is our reworked flower bed, an update on what it's doing, and the plants are all settling in and looking quite happy, and I'm very pleased with that. Now over here, you can see we have a little more of the garden phlox tucked behind the asters. There's more there. And then over here, little asters. And one of the things I like to do is I've mentioned this before, if I have a blank spot in the garden, go ahead and put a pot in with some annuals. That's just some New Guinea impatiens. And the rose that we cut back is blooming again. And there's, the color on this is dark, but that's some butterfly bush that I had cut back pretty brutally, but it's coming back. And let's see, the last thing in here, hope you didn't get too dizzy with that, but this is the hardy geranium that I cut back, and it is reblooming. I did a little experiment. This side I cut back really to the ground, and this side I just kind of gave a little haircut to see if doing one or the other made a better difference. And you know, I don't see that this one that I brutalized is doing any better, so I think in the future I'll just do a little trimming. This, I always thought it was just like a hardy ageratum or something when I first saw it, but this actually is, I think, blue mist, and it volunteers all over my yard. And if you can see carefully, there are buds all over the whole thing, so this will be covered in blue fluffy little flowers. Now I'm going to walk you out, because I've been teasing you with this for months. This is my clethra that I absolutely love. And you can see the colors. The little buds are dark pink, and as they open up, the inside is white, has a little white throat. And here's the bee. The bees love it. Yeah, I can get him there. He's having a little fine dining. This is an older flower, and he's more white, but the bees absolutely love the clethra. And I do too. And when we bought this house, there were like maybe 2 stalks on this plant, and it's just grown and grown, and every year it gets prettier, and this year it's just really doing a number. And I did cut back the horse chestnut tree so this would get a little more sun, and it is getting a little tall, so it's at the point now where it's about 6 feet tall. But I love clethra. I encourage you to get some clethra if you don't have that. And here's a little bit of sweet pea in there, but I have pulled it off the clethra. I didn't want it to choke it, because it can be a bit of a garden bully. Okay, here are my pots, and we've had a lot of rain, so I've not been watering my plants, but these pots need water. They're so full they can't get the water, so I can see the petunias are a little thirsty. Still blooming, but a little thirsty looking. Okay, now into the back. There's our phlox. And these plants will bloom later in the summer. I'll show those to you. Here's our phlox and the bouncing bet that one of my viewers helped me identify. And these are my pencil hollies, and I think those came from Costco for less than 20 bucks a piece. And these hostas were in the backyard and really, really crowded, and I think each of them had like 3 leaves. They were pretty sad looking. So I just stuck them in here thinking they would be very small, but they've gotten to be quite enthusiastic. And this chrysanthemum I bought last fall. And usually when you buy those things in the fall, they've been forced to bloom and they don't survive, but this one survived and it's blooming quite early. And here's his little friend over here. And the ones that I planted in that front flower bed, the little garden flower bed, the cottage flower bed, I think these are all the same color. So I think he'll bloom too. Those were just in smaller pots. I really wasn't paying attention to them. One of them even got knocked over by a squirrel. Now these are, I can't remember if these are a wild onion or a wild garlic or whatever they are, but they're kind of fun. They do a little twisty thing, and they're in the allium family, so they'll make little balls, little floral balls that are fun. And there's also some goldenrod back there that's getting ready to bloom. Now here is the blank spot. This is where we had the spirea that was crowding and shading my mountain laurel, and it was not supposed to get more than about 2 feet tall, and it was like 4 or 5 feet tall. And so I've got a big spot here that I need to put something in, but I want it to be low growing, and I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll run by some more of those half price annuals and put those in for this year, and I don't know what I'll do. But one thing I would like to do, this is my lupin, and I do think this is an ideal location because the pathway keeps the soil a little bit cooler. And I don't know anybody else that's gotten lupin to bloom around here, but I love it, and mine bloomed. And I saved my seeds, and I need to scarify them. Need to get a little sandpaper and work on the seeds and plant those and see if I can get some of those to grow in this area. But back behind, I'll think of something, because I do not want the ivy to take over in here. The daylilies are spent, and I don't want to cut them back because I want the plant to get stronger. And these are my asters that'll bloom in the fall. Now back over here, I still have some tiger lilies blooming, and that is more of a lavender colored butterfly bush. Shows a little more here. And back behind that is my oak leaf hydrangea, and we are having problems with vines growing in it. And by we, I mean me and my neighbor. She sees the plant even more than I do, and I came out the other day and she was pulling the vines, kind of hanging over the fence and pulling the vines, and she looked embarrassed, like she'd been caught with her hand in the candy jar. And I said, oh no, if you hadn't done it, I'd have gone in your yard and I'd have done the same thing. So we are both trying to keep the vines out of this area because they are pretty bad. But beautiful little butterfly bush, a little bit of tiger lily. You can see he's on his last leg too, tail end of that. Now here's our little sitting area, and the pops of pink are some New Guinea impatiens, and on the ground there is kalanchoe. And this is the acanthus, and the flowers, I don't know if you can see this, I'll get close so you can see. The flowers are spent. That's the flower portion. But the spire is so interesting. I usually leave it. I suppose you could cut it back, but it's just so dramatic. I really enjoy that. We had a bad rain the other day, and I've been pulling branches out, and I'm seeing a big branch in the middle of that bush. And again, here is a vine. Oh, makes me crazy. And back there is another Rose of Sharon, a little different color, the pink with the red throat. And here's the kalanchoe that you can't kill. And my elephant ear is looking a little droopy. We had a really bad windstorm followed by a rainstorm the other day, and it toppled this one, so he's feeling a little sad. He didn't even get any of the rain because he was toppled, but there he is. Okay. I cannot believe I still have some coral bells off of that heuchera. And here are the elephant ears here. And I'll bring you back to the decks in a little bit so you can see what we're doing in the garden. A little more phlox. I'm trying to keep these guys upright. Ah, they're beginning to set. This is the monkshood. It's beginning to set some little floral buds, and they will bloom late October, early November. They're very late flower. Now down here, the liriope, the monkey grass, is starting to bloom a little bit. But this is an area that's just been covered by ivy, taken over by the ivy. And if there's an area that I need to attack next, it's in here to get some of this out. And this has, as you can see, there's a little bit of sun in here, so I need to grow something interesting. Now here are my hydrangeas. These are so interesting that, yeah, because our soil is a little bit acidic, we have blue ones, but after they've bloomed, they stay on and they begin to fade. And the color is just incredible. So you can see this portion's been kind of in the shade because it was down, so it was a little protected. So it still has the blue, and the other is fading out to a green. And then up here you can see there's some pink coming on. And there's a part of me that likes this even better than the fresh floral. It's just so interesting. But you can see the bottom side maintains the blue from the shade. And we have a branch that needs to come out. That one must have died for some reason, so I need to cut him out. He's just gone brown. Now, I want to show you this. I've been teasing you about this plant, and it is finally beginning to bloom. This is the hardy begonia, which is a perennial that dies back completely. When we originally bought the house, again, there were like 5 leaves, and it has gotten so nice and big, and it's really pretty because it kind of hangs over the pathway here, and it creates these beautiful little flowers that come in like a little strip of flowers, and it will continue to make these flowers on this one little stem. And even after they die, they make the most beautiful little seed head, and they root quite readily. If I break off one, bump into it or something, I can stick it in the ground and it'll grow. So you'll continue to see that until the frost, I believe, because it's quite interesting. Now over here is another one of my hydrangeas that you can see changing colors. And back in here On the front are some impatiens that I added, and only one of them has flowers on it. They're all growing quite nicely, and they're beginning to set flowers, but it's going to take them a minute to get some more flowers on it. And back behind it are some white begonias that are flowering quite nicely, and that's the astilbe. That the back two still have their seed hedge, which are very interesting, I think. And these two pots here and over there, the lighter pots, those have the New Guinea impatiens, and I moved them, and the plants are doing quite well, but again, they're setting flower buds, and so they should be blooming nicely, and it'll give us some nice pops of pink in a bit. But here's our big pop of pink, which is the garden phlox. And when I moved into the house, this was all the garden phlox I had, and it was about, I'd say about 20% the size of that. So I've kind of tucked it around in different places in the yard, and like right here there is some. It's not blooming yet, but it's getting ready to bloom. But this one's taken off, and I think this one just freely seeded over here. But I'll show you what I'm talking about with cutting it back. I was doing a Chelsea chop on it. It's real easy to see here. So you can see here was, there's a fly on my hand. Here was where I cut it. And then right beneath it, it branched, and we have the two flower buds. And every one of these was cut. This one actually made 3 for some reason, but I love garden phlox. I think that's a wonderful plant. And just a quick look at the shade garden. I'm having a little bit of a problem in this spot here. We've had so much rain that this spot I think got kind of boggy, and here is one hellebore, and he seems to be doing fine, and I had another hellebore where the squirrel is, but it got root rot, and I was even having some problems with my phlox here, and he got a little root rot too. So I think I've just got something going on here. Maybe I need to take it out and put some sand in there, or some rocks, something to help it drain a little better. And another place that I might have some root rot, I think I might be having some problem with that heuchera. I think I might take him out and make sure he doesn't die, but the light green one is not looking real enthusiastic, and I think his soil is too moist. I haven't watered him at all, just the rain. And here was my one that's the purple color that was so small, and he's growing quite nicely. Now, got an impatiens back here that's trying to set some more blooms, and hopefully he'll bloom soon. But this particular pot, I can see from outside this, when I look through this door, which I do quite often, I can see through the door from my family room and from my bedroom. So I always try to keep something that blooms in this pot. Now, I've had this pot, I think this is the 3rd summer I've had this pot. The first year I tried a fern. Fern died. Next year I tried a fancy begonia. Fancy begonia died. But just a plain old begonia, I thought, I'm tired of spending a lot of money on things for this pot. I wanted something really spectacular, but I've determined that just a basic begonia is the best thing to do, and it does quite nicely, and I can see it from inside. So this is the shady part of my garden. Now, I've been doing a lot of garden tasks, and one of the things that this time of year you need to worry about is heat. So I get up in the mornings early, and I try to get all my gardening done by about 10 o'clock in the morning. And there's always something to do in the garden. And this time of year, I've been going around doing it, but I didn't make it back here. The hostas bloom, and then they leave these kind of dead stalks here. So I've been cutting those back, and I haven't gotten them all of them because I've got a lot of hostas in the yard. Now, another thing I need to do is I'm going to transplant this guy, bring him out and put him in a better spot so he can grow a little more enthusiastically. Another thing I do, every time it rains, the squirrels' nests fall out, so I'm constantly picking things up. It's kind of like in the morning I go through the yard and pick up what the squirrels have left, the mess they've made. Now, I'll show you some other tasks that we've been working on. Now, other people would use this area for fine dining and eat outside on the porch, which we do sometimes, but for the most part, this has become kind of my gardening spot because it stays nice and shady. It's close by, so I can keep an eye on things. Probably the first thing you'll notice is the New Guinea impatiens. I can see the top of this table very clearly through these windows here. So I always like to keep something that looks pretty. So that's my beauty there. Now over here, this is kind of my little plant nursery. If you've looked at any of my old videos, you might recognize the shape. This was a beautiful ivy topiary. And this pot and this stem had another topiary that I picked up at Trader Joe's last year around Christmas time for very inexpensive. Well, the little guy came into my house with spider mite. So it killed that one and it gave the disease to this one. So I have been regrowing it. This one I started first. I love the little compact leaf here. I can't believe anybody goes to trouble to. I'm the person. Growing ivy, buying ivy and putting it in a pot. But I love ivy topiaries. So he's doing quite nicely. And this one I've gotten just some little variegated ivies from Home Depot. And we're going to see if we can't get him looking a little better. Now right here, this is a hibiscus that last year I was cutting back the dead branches and I accidentally cut a live branch, and it was probably about 3 feet long. Well, maybe not quite that, maybe 24 inches long. And I cut each one and stuck it in a pot with just potting soil. And so it was sticking out, and right where it met the soil, 2 of the 3 began to grow. And the third one died, and the other one, the squirrel dumped over. And by the time I found it, it was too far gone. But this guy has done quite nicely, just rooted right here. So if I need another hydrangea, I can start growing another hydrangea. Now over here are my basil that I grew from seed, a little inexpensive packet of seeds, and I grew them here. And 2 of them, you see there, 2 of them are missing. This is where the basil came from that I put in that front cottage garden. And maybe I'll stick some more in there. They seem to be doing quite well. Now here's what I did this week. Now, believe it or not, this wonderful wire cloche came from my local Goodwill for just a couple of bucks, which is one of my all-time favorite finds. But last year, well, 2 years ago, 2 summers ago, I bought some flaxseed and I sprouted it, and then in the fall before the freeze, I transplanted it into the garden. And I'll put in a picture right here, or some video. This is what the phlox looked like spring a year ago when we first started doing videos. And last summer I started to do some seeds, and we went out of town and they didn't get the growth they needed, and I stuck them in the ground and they did not survive the winter. So I am not doing that again. So the thing about foxglove is it's a biennial. So the first year it doesn't flower, and so you can sprout it anytime, you know, between now and the frost, and then as long as it's sprouted, you can stick it in the ground and it will grow. And all you have to do is just sprinkle it on the top, and you can probably see those little grainy things. Those are the seeds. And I keep my sprayer right here, and I keep my seeds moist, and they will sprout within the next couple of weeks, and I'll try to get them as big as possible. And I will include right here how I sprouted these. Now the seeds are incredibly small. So here's my packet of seeds, and I put it on a piece of paper. I've got 2 pieces of paper here that I've cut, just 8.5 by 11 computer paper, cut them in half, and I divide half, and then I divide each of those halves. So now I've got 1/4 of the seeds, or approximately 1/4 of the seeds, on the paper. Then I cut those individual pieces. I had 12 little containers that I was going to sprout, so I just was going to divide it into 12. So again, I divided each one of those 1/4 into thirds, and so that gives me 1/12 of the seeds. I fold it up, and I use that as a little way to sprinkle it, because with really, really small seeds, it's just about impossible to not put them all in the same spot. And I wanted to spread them around on the compost, so I sprinkle them over. I put, you know, obviously I started by putting the potting soil in it and watering it extremely well, and then place the seeds on top. And for the next couple of weeks while they're sprouting, I will keep them moist. They like sun to sprout, so I wanted them in a spot that is relatively sunny. And this is something it's a good time if you're to do it. I found if I wait any later, it doesn't get the growth that I want from it. And definitely I want foxglove next year. So those are my summer tasks in my summer garden. And thanks for joining us, and I hope you're staying cool. And those of you in the Southwest, I definitely think of you with your horrible, horrible heat, and pray that that'll end soon. Anyway, thanks for joining us at Stone Cottage, and I'll see you next time.